Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I'm your host, Danny Nierenberg. Before I introduce our guest, I just want to share something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's how much creativity I think is happening in people's kitchens right now because of the pandemic. I think because people have been sort of maybe forced, to be creative, that they're coming up with new products. And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of innovation from entrepreneurs over the next couple of years with some exciting and really healthy products coming out of people's kitchens that will hopefully end up on store shelves. And innovation in food, and especially innovation in snack food, is something our guest knows a lot about. Brigette Wolf serves as the Global Head of SnackFutures, Mondelēz International's Innovation and Venture Hub, and she also oversees the new startup engagement program called Colab, which launched just recently. And it's really a program to discover and collaborate with emerging entrepreneurs, like those folks who are making things in their kitchens right now. Brigette, so good to see you. I'm so excited about Colab. Congratulations on the launch.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It is an amazing milestone to be with you today to talk about this.
It's great. So what is Colab in a nutshell?
Yeah, so if you remember, SnackFutures is our innovation and venture hub at Mondelēz International. We were created to push the boundaries in snacking and think and behave like startups and invest and partner with them. So this is the next evolution of our journey of really going deep and broad with the startup community and collaborating, which is where the name Colab comes from. So Colab is a program for startups that will be a 12-week program that you will have mentorship and expertise and kind of the scope of Mondelēz's scale and global reach. But you also now, as we'll get into how SnackFutures has been developing some of our own brands, is learning that entrepreneurial spirit and that ecosystem. So it's a program to be quite intimate. We're really hoping to partner with you and just thrilled to be talking about it today.
That's great. What does it mean to behave like a startup?
Yeah, we talk a lot to startups and in the community. So it's really to listen to them, where time is everything. Cash is burning. Passion is the foundation of what they fight for and that pain point, whether it's the consumer. So to think like a startup is, what is the core reason that I am in this business? Why did I start this? And who is that consumer I want to listen and serve? Which sometimes is almost that uncompromising defiance of what you're going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
A level of both, we talk about resilience, but resourcefulness. They don't always have the scale and dollars. And so how they are creative, as you just talked about, not only in the kitchen, but how they think about going to market and getting feedback and starting to get the confidence and the feedback in the marketplace that they're onto something is really something that we as a big food place have really tried to embrace and behave and echo.
And before you talked a little bit about empathy for startups, and I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Yeah, so in the past 2 years since we started SnackFutures, we've actually created 5 brands ourselves with a very deliberate design of hyper-focused consumer centricity. So if this one person won't buy it, no one will. So really laser focused, and then building that up from scratch and building in a new ecosystem to start small and as that way of really finding those success points and confidence markers, those leading and lagging indicators that tell us, yep, we're onto something. So what that meant was when we hear startups, we're like, oh yeah, and we can talk about 2020 of the year of the pivot. And as we went to go into brick and mortar in certain places and the world shut down, to really understand, okay, what do we do now? What do we do with inventory? What do we do with the plans? How do we change how we're going to talk to people and reach them? So I think having lived through a lot of this in different phases and then throwing on that, crazy gasoline of last year to understand what a lot of startups are going through.
Well, and I think it's different than other sort of ventures like this one, where you understand what these startups are going through, and you put that in place. I feel like sometimes when there are these hubs for innovation, that they sort of ignore that part, sort of the human part of it, and that's why I think this has a lot of potential, because you're really sort of not hand holding, but helping people along, walking in step with them as they try to figure out issues and solutions to really big problems.
I think that was probably one of the biggest earliest learnings we had with working with startups is one, it's a mutual level of respect, right? This isn't big looking down and small or the other of and hipper and faster. It's really finding the common ground of each side has a lot of value to offer the other, whether it's in experience or in insights. You can go both ways. And it's finding a way of setting common expectations so that each one is talking to each other with a mutual understanding of what is it I need and how you can help me. And on the flip side, so it really was um, to listen to what was going on with the community, and to your point, it was really bringing us down. Big companies hear a lot about big food and big, but the truth is they are made up of individuals, and it's the humans and us that care about what's going on as we talk about what's going on in the future of our food, in the future of the planet, to have some fun along the way. So it is really making a personal connection to every startup that we engage with.
Great. Brigette, I ask you this question almost every time I see you. Mondelēz is a big food company. You make Oreos. You also make these delicious, healthful snacks that we'll talk more about later that are good for the planet in so many ways. What's in it for you to do this?
What's not? I mean, that's a little bit of the starting point. We talk about as Mondelēz to be the leader in snacking. And if you are going to be the leader of snacking, you need to lead the future of snacking, which is why SnackFutures is so important. The core of the business is magnificent, and everyone loves their Oreos, and we need to keep that going. But there's a range of choices that consumers are looking for that may not be addressed by our current portfolio or have different needs emerging. And so I think it's both keeping the core business relevant, but then also providing that broader choice to consumers so that every snack occasion can be addressed by Mondelēz. So it really is a fundamental business issue. I would also say to some extent, it's an employment issue, right? To say, do I believe in our purpose of the company of snacking made right? And are we living that? Are we notching up and delivering on sustainability and well-being that matters to me as an employee and can attract talent? So in both of them, it's like by doing good, you get good. And I think it's a non-negotiable at this point.
That's great. I mean, that's good to hear. That's not something every big company is willing to say. And I think, again, that's what makes this a little bit different and exciting. I mean, this is a real opportunity for startups to learn from mistakes that your company has made in the past and how to sort of overcome them. We've talked about big and small, or you've talked about big and small, and I think there's this sort of reciprocal relationship that can go on. What do you expect to learn?
So much, and it's sometimes just the obvious could be the insight of what was the space that the entrepreneur saw that was an emerging need as being kind of the boots on the ground of it. This is what's bubbling up in the world of consumers. I think though also, and we've already seen this and heard this from employees who have done some work with startups that we've brought in, just the growth mindset and the learning agility and the different ways of approaching things, that it's not, as you said, there's a lot of experience and expertise that goes in that can help startups either avoid mistakes or kind of think a little bit further out than just the immediate what's in front of me. But as you think about scale, can you plan for the scale or have a sight to being bigger? And what does that mean? So, just it's like a chessboard, think a couple steps out. But at the same time, we can learn, oh, we didn't know you could do that, right? Somebody learns a new way, a different approach, and different routes to market, different consumer groups, different ways of speaking to consumers. So it really is, it's an abundance of expertise on both sides that with the spirit of generosity that we're going to learn from each other, we'll grow from each other, really is the opportunity for Colab.
That's really interesting because I have different ways to do it. And if you can learn, because these are startups, they're often young folks from a lot of different cultures and communities, and they do know their customer pretty well at this point because they're not just, they're not startups who are starting from the very beginning. They've been, going through this process for a while.
Yeah, they've been having those one-on-one interactions probably from the very beginning, and data to them is every human conversation that they've had, every email, every tweet. It's a joke. My daughter's like, "Why aren't you on TikTok and doing all of this with all of our brands?" And that is just different ways of expressing and connecting to consumers, and all those other channels that are emerging from the traditional D2C, and even that's exploding, and different ways of delivering through digital. It's another way of exploring and learning with them.
We talked a little bit about the pandemic before, and SnackFutures, and you have had to adjust to many changes. We've all had to adjust to changes. How do you think, we've talked about how these startups can help you find different ways to market, but how do you think Colab will help Mondelēz sort of stay up to date and be fresh and keep learning?
I think by having that kind of pipeline, for lack of a better term, to what's going on in the marketplace, it's just another way of keeping our ears to the ground and seeing what's going out there. And there's nothing better. Yes, there's wonderful data, and AI can do more than we've ever seen before. But at the same time, when you start talking to people, again, to me, it always goes back to what is the human that you are talking to? Who is the human that you're serving, and how do they really behave in their kitchen, at their table? When you start to talk to people saying, well, this is actually what we're seeing in the marketplace, and we tried this and it didn't work. So I think for us, it's a way to future-proof what's going on. And then so many startups fail, right? So we don't want them to fail. We can't afford everyone failing if they don't have that support, but they have brilliant ideas and they just didn't know how to either commercialize it or bring it to life. So that is really important, again, for ourselves, for the planet. We all want to grow, and we need to grow through consumption. So you have to do it in a really smart, resourceful way now, and seeing where the startup community is going, and then how we can help them kind of survive. I was reading the book Loon Shots, and they talk every innovation has those 3 deaths. So can we spare them a death, or can we bring them back? Can you give them another life to go through the next iteration?
Yeah, it's so different than it was a decade ago with, I think, food startups. So many failed because they didn't have these kinds of opportunities. So yeah, it's just another chance to get like your foot in the door and really, be able to be successful as a startup. We have a question from somebody who's watching, so let me just read it for our listeners. Are we thinking of creating an integrated set of companies to be brought together to create and sell products?
It's an amazing idea. Our original vision for Colab is to bring individual companies. However, and I may keep hammering this, but the collaborative nature of Colab was really and is designed that it's not just, and it's actually, so thank you for this question. It's not just between Mondelēz and the startups. It's actually within the startups themselves. And if you get part of it, you'll see that as part of our curriculum. We really do want this to be a collaborative effort. So if there is an idea or a partnership that could emerge out of it, or a bigger picture or a new outcome that we may have, why not? And I think that absolutely could be possible.
Well, and it takes the competition out of it. The startups can learn from one another and feel less competitive because they're all going through the same thing, even though they might end up being competitors in the future. So I love that sort of startup to startup nature of this. Another question or comment, listening to your pitch, we are a local honey company with an established presence in the regional market looking for guidance in nutrient-dense snack offerings that we want to launch to supplement our business viability. Connecting to consumers is in our future, and is a real importance.
So I think the question is either how do you communicate or how you roll out, and please feel free to write back in. In this case, there's a couple things to think about, and especially as we get into nutrition and health as a big company, claims are a very tricky area. Let's put it that way. You want to be able to be enticing enough to consumers. You also need to be clear enough to what it is you're promising. And depending on how far that claim goes, you may need substantial substantiation is actually what we call it for regulatory and legal. So I would say one thing as you expand, and we talk about this all the time, smaller companies lots of times make amazing claims, heroic claims. But at the end of the day, and not to be negative, but the only one who's going to sue you for that claim as litigation, if you're lucky, is maybe your car. And that's not so great. As you get bigger, the pockets get deeper, the bank account gets bigger. So it is something to be mindful of how you communicate, which is in general, how do you make it clear to a consumer to understand what the benefit is? And that's sometimes even a nuance that we'll say it has this. And then the question is, well, so what? Like, okay, if I don't know what that ingredient does naturally, why does it matter that you're the only one that has it? So you have to explain the benefit to consumers. Then the other piece is as you get bigger and if you start pushing the envelope on the nutrient-dense foods, just making sure you have, whether it's the ingredient and the nutrition straight creds to back that up, because you really want to make sure you have that.
Absolutely. Yeah, on yesterday's podcast, we talked a lot about, my guest and I talked a lot about activist eaters. And, you've talked about this rise of an ethical consumer who wants different things from their snacks or their food in general. And SnackFutures has invested a lot in things like upcycled foods, which I don't think everyone understands what that term is, and also plant-based foods. So first, can you give folks sort of an idea of what an upcycled food is and what it looks like?
Yes, and if I do it on justice, there is the Upcycled Food Association that we've become a member of SnackFutures. But an upcycled food is it's essentially something that has been processed or used in a certain way that would normally then go to waste, but it's a usable ingredient. So I'll give a few examples that we've seen around the world. So one is the world of beer. Many people know the grains, hops, barleys that get used there. How do you, upcycle when those grains are called spent grains? How do you use them? And there's a lot of nutrition in there. So we're going to repurpose what was kind of the byproduct of the process. So that's kind of one. There's a wonderful company doing this with coffee grinds that we met actually at Seeds and Chips when we were together, called Coffee Bueno. So, again, taking something that you would normally throw away because it's kind of had its use to redoing it. In the world of SnackFutures, what we have is two areas. One is we take in dirt kitchen snacks, vegetables that would normally go to waste, and we're rescuing them in this case. And I would say it's less of an upcycling because in this case, it hasn't been used yet. It just would have been thrown out. Still really important not to leave, we say like leave nothing on the field. You don't want to leave waste on the farms and in the field. In the case of cacao, which is our cacao fruit snack, this case is really interesting. When you look at how chocolate is made, it comes from this beautiful cacao fruit, which is a pod. It kind of looks like a football. And when you go inside, you take the chocolate beans out and you start roasting and you get your beautiful chocolate. But there's a lot of fruit left and that gets wasted. So we're taking that fruit and putting that to good use in cacao. And so that's kind of, you think about upcycling is how do you keep, instead of recycling, right, where you're just using it kind of for the same purpose over, upcycling is now I'm giving it another value and I'm adding it to a use case.
It's great. Thank you so much. And I love that you're part of the Upcycled Food Association. They're doing such incredible work and really bringing these products to the forefront in a really cool way. And I think people, the more we change the semantics and stay away from the word waste and talk about upcycling and reusing and repurposing, I think the better, so that more consumers will be open to eating something that they once would have thought of as trash.
Right. And it's all valuable.
Absolutely. So going back to Colab, this will be a 12-week program for these folks. Can you sort of walk me through the process of what that looks like?
Yeah. I won't go into all the details because it won't be so much fun. But I will say to the team that has put so much thought and heart and effort into this, as well as to our partners, and I shouldn't really call them out, because what the curriculum will look like, in COVID willing, we'll have a bit of a kickoff. We'll have a midpoint check-in and another live point, and then the closing will be a live showcase. So one of the things that we heard from the startup community is, in the world of COVID, having exposure to investors and potential retailers is really hard. And while there's been just a Herculean effort in the virtual space, there's nothing always the same as being able to meet someone. So we'll try and do that. If it has to be virtual, so be it. We'll make it virtual as well. But really trying to give that community a chance to a platform to see themselves. And then the curriculum itself is, I would say, kind of 75% baked and 25% still in flex, because what we want is to hear, and as you apply, one of the questions is, how do you think Mondelēz can help you? Kind of what's your pain point and why us? Because that's really important. We need to be able to help you. If we can't help you, then it's kind of like, it's interesting to run through the courses, but that's one piece. So we will be catering some of the curriculum to their specific needs, as well as the mentorship and some of the experts that we partner with them with. But each week, basically, there is a rhythm of external and internal speakers and subject matter experts, everything from your legal and your negotiations to PR to packaging, operations, sales. So if you think about everything of running a business, we have that. And if it's not answered, we can always raise a hand. I mean, that's what I think one of the most amazing things of the spirit of Mondelēz employees, and this has been a general cultural point, but people are really willing to help. And all you have to do is just figure out who it is I need to ask. And it's that Rolodex of someone just points to someone, and we've got a worldwide enterprise to reach into. So sometimes it's the it's the most bizarre, from I have a tax question to I have a nutrition question to I have a supplier question, and all of those we can tap into.
That's fantastic. It's wonderful. And I love that you're catering to specific needs. Again, this is something I think that's different from a lot of other ways that big businesses do this kind of startup training, that they don't always, it's sort of, cookie cutter. And this is really more specific in so many ways. They'll get a lot of mentorship from people like you as well, right?
Yes. I'm planning on being in this. It's funny. Some people say, can we sit on the class itself? Internally, can we run through the curriculum? Because again, even what we might do as a lens, like how we do it today, the startup might be like, well, this is how we've been running it. And why can't we just continue that way? And there might be one of two things that happen. You can continue until you get to certain size, and then you'll have to think about A, B, and C. Or, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, go back to the mothership and tell Mondelēz, do you know you can do it this way? And it's much faster and much easier. And I think, as big companies growing up, there's processes and there are reasons to both protect the quality of the food, the safety of the food, the safety of employees, the well-being of the company. But at the same time, sometimes we get in the point, well, why are we doing it this way? And then we can all of a sudden have this really interesting, there's another way to do it. So I think it will hopefully be for both.
Absolutely. Again, it goes back to keeping your fingers on the pulse of what consumers want, what eaters want. And I think that has changed a lot during COVID. People are really more focused on well-being, and I know that's something that's important to you and the company. And you've talked in the past, we've talked about well-being brands. Can you just, I think people, again, they don't exactly know what that means.
Yeah. Look, we have these debates actually in my house all the time of there is hard healthy, right? We can go down that way, and we'll talk about vegetables in a moment. And then there's total well-being, because I love my glass of wine and I love my chocolate, and give me a good scoop of ice cream. So this is really a holistic approach. And so I would say Mondelēz's portfolio has a wonderful mental, emotional well-being, connecting people socially, having those kind of social points of togetherness. Where I want to push the next level is more on the literal. Let's start looking at some of the well-being where we go to for both planetary and people health. So I'll have a little bit of show and tell if you can indulge me. I'll start overseas, because this is, everyone we talk about, consumers are more aware of what they put in their body, but they're also very aware of where the food comes from and what its impact on the planet is. And so whether that's, you talked about activists, whether that's for animal rights, and we talk about planet health, but you could be plant-based, and it's not just for a meat alternative or a dairy alternative. Plant-based is Mother Nature's gift to all of us of what she grows from the ground, pretty much. So we have in Europe a brand called Nokoe, and I'll get my hands straight. So this brand is closest into our categories that we do, because it's a cracker. It's an aperitif cracker for millennials. But what's unique about it was we brought in a carbon expert, and it's a carbon compensating brand. So it's neutral, it's locally sourced and produced, and we've measured that carbon in anything remaining. We've tried to minimize as much as we can. Anything we do, we have offsets. So again, designing this for someone who says, yeah, I want a delicious cracker to socialize with my friends, but how much better would it be that I know that what I'm doing actually is helping clean up the planet? And so that's really important. And then as we've talked about upcycling, we talk about cacao. And this is now in the US. You can buy this on direct to consumer, or if you're in California. Most of our brands are starting small in California. It's just the market is ripe, and we can incubate there. But all of the brands I'll talk about in the US are D2C as well, which was a learning that we've had from startups, and the blessing and curse of COVID is how quickly can you get this stuff out. But cacao has both. We have good for you ingredients. The cacao fruit actually has a lot of nutrition, and having clean fruits and clean food in there, but it's also taking that upcycled cacao fruit. So using that to good. So you get a little bit of a hybrid. So now we've gone from hardcore planetary to a hybrid. We then have Dirt Kitchen snacks, and there's two. So I'll go to the first one, which is, it's a nut and veggie mix. So this is something, how do you make vegetables snackably delicious? And this is where you talk about the consumers, people who love vegetables. It's not like I need to make vegetables taste better. We love them. We just need to figure out a way to make them a little more convenient. They're really good for you. This is in the health space, as we talk about, eating vegetables are good for you. So how do I do it more? And then the other part in that line, just because we talked about rescuing, is the veggie crisp, actually. And you can even see in the picture, right? It's not a perfect blush pepper. It's got some funky coloring. It might be a wonky shape. But that's where we hear, again, like, my kids would be like, it looks funny. I'm like, well, the second you mash it up, you don't know the difference. And we all talk about, like, being crass. Like, once it all goes down your stomach, like, did it really matter? Like, so close your eyes and enjoy the taste. And the last of the babies, because we have talked about the future of snacking, and it wouldn't be fair if I didn't talk about something that's pushing the envelope the most, is milligram. For the craze, I don't know if this is working, but it's a nut butter line that we are doing with mushrooms, powered by mushrooms. This is such a cool area of research really getting explored. Mushrooms are what they eat, and we're learning about that, of how they grow. And there's just a really cool science experiment to see how people are growing mushroom kits. I was just reading about So really different ways. And then we have a kid snack that behind me, Ruckus and Co. frozen smoothies. So trying to get all consumers, how do we reach them? Very different from our core today, but very much in need. And as we've all been home, if you start watching more of what you've been eating, you're like, I'm still snacking. I'm snacking more than ever because I'm also now actually leaving my desk less so. I'm not walking down the street, or we're not leaving for out to lunch. So we're snacking a ton at our desk. So the question is, throughout the day, what is the array of choices that I want to have for myself and my well-being? What's my mental state? So sometimes I need the cookie, and sometimes I need the burst of energy, or I need a little bit more focus, or just knowing I've done my body good, or I've done the planet good. It's great to be able to say yes all the time to your family on certain snacks. But life is all about balance, and that's really what we're trying to do.
Well, thanks for describing all that and sort of your approach to well-being. But what I also like about these products is that they're educating consumers about things they didn't know about. Like, who knew that the cacao fruit was nutritious and that we shouldn't have been wasting it all this time? And that if it can be sourced in a way that is ethical and, fair, and good to the planet, then that's, a win-win-win in so many ways.
Yeah, I think it's been almost as exciting for us to discover this stuff, and in learning about it. And again, back to talking to startups, it's like when you travel, I think I told you this before, you go to one place and then you meet people and they tell you about somewhere they've been. You're like, oh my God, I have to go explore that place. The world of startups is like that. You meet one and they start telling you about what they're working in some area. And you're like, that's incredible. And like, well, you should talk to so-and-so. And you walk forward and then they're doing something, more different. And they're seeing how to recycle or upcycle and repurpose, or they're like, did you just know this food comes from Africa and it has all these amazing nutrients? I mean, that's where the beauty is. We talk about biodiversity sometimes, right? And in mass production, it's hard, but what if we can get our palates to just start exploring the world? Again, Mother Nature just has so much to offer. And I think there are so many brilliant entrepreneurs who are, whether it's in their travels or in their personal life, or just serendipitously come across something that has changed their personal life, or someone that they know and they saw this could really help them. That's really the magic. It's new to the world, but it's always been there, and we get to now explore it and understand it ourselves.
I love the phrase palettes exploring the world. That's great. I think one thing that over the last year has really surprised me is that people who never talked about supply chains suddenly know what a supply chain is. And I think, and when we were together, I think the last time in 2019 at the Global Food Innovation Summit, or otherwise known as Seeds and Chips, you spoke of this need for gradually shifting supply chains to be more sustainable. And that's one, I think, opportunity that startups have that most big companies don't, that they can start doing that from the very beginning. And I'm wondering, how you sort of not teach that to startups, but sort of, push them toward that kind of thinking.
Look, you have an opportunity to kind of get it right, or as close as you can from the beginning. And or you can design and plan for it to be, nothing's going to be perfect, but you can have a vision of, I want this ultimately on that destination for this brand to ultimately be able to do A, B, and C. And when you start from scratch, you can start figuring out, how do I start laying that out where I can enable it? So it's just a way of not getting yourself stuck in a corner that you can't unwind it. And in fairness, big companies are learning to unwind in really big ways. I mean, Mondelēz has two huge crops, cocoa and wheat. They are foundational to our company, and we are doing things with Cocoa Life and that program and farmers, and going, to your point, going all the way down to those growing those crops. Same thing with wheat that we do. So you're just learning it. It's just, to your point, it's harder, and it's harder at the scale. And that's what we're learning too, is, until we get the marketplace to rebalance itself a little bit and get all of our practices, where we want to be, it's much easier to start there and learn with consumers and to educate consumers as you go. And I think that's a unique benefit that startups have.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that one of the ways that you've talked about this a lot already, keeping your finger on the pulse of consumers, is understanding that consumers want different things than they wanted 12 months ago, let's say. And I think there's a real opportunity for these startups to, be thinking, okay, what are consumers going to want next year? Hopefully we're on the other side of this pandemic. People are going to be more concerned about what they're putting in their bodies probably than ever before. We all know that this likely won't be the last kind of pandemic or health crisis. How can startups, in the same way that they can start with, better supply chains, how can they start with that kind of health advocacy in mind?
I think it's a question of, one, as they're starting out, where on the spectrum do they want to be, right? Is it, I'm almost a food as medicine and I'm a medical replacement, and therefore where do I want to be? Or I'm just trying to eat much cleaner and have my sourcing clean and have that level of transparency. So there is a little bit of, you're not going to be everything day one, and you're not going to be everything to everyone. So there is some judgment of, where do I want to play? Who am I serving? And understanding their needs and being honest. I think sometimes we want to do everything, and we say this to our suppliers, actually. So here's a tidbit that I've been sharing that we love as a team. But when you will talk to a new partner or for yourself, what is your superpower? That's what you want to know. Everyone will promise everything to you, and they probably can do a lot, but they do a few things or a singular thing brilliantly better than anyone. You want them for that. And then on the other stuff, it's like, if you don't want to get other, people into the mix, maybe that's where you go. Same thing for yourself. What is your company super the consumer? And an anti-allergen, that someone who struggles with an area that they haven't been able to do. And it's not trying to shameless plug, but we've had the conversations on the gluten-free Oreo. And I was like, this is almost a diversity and inclusion, because people who've wanted to participate in that social experience, who've had celiac or somewhere else, may not have it. And a friend of mine sent a picture of her 17-year-old daughter and was like, she can now celebrate. And so even that way, it's like, we think about, and to that, I'll just, because I'm on a roll here, of diversity. The BIPOC community, we have, minority entrepreneurs that, whether in their communities, there's specific needs, or they just want to serve and give better access to different food, there's a world of opportunity there. So we've got a long way to go. And somebody had asked me a while ago, these spaces seem so crowded. Why are you still entering? Like, there's a lot of fragmentation in the world of snacking. But you know what? That just means that there hasn't been one singular answer, and consumers don't want just one thing. Like, I don't know anyone, unless they are just really, really disciplined, who have the same cereal every day with the same sandwich every day and the same dinner. We don't. We like variety. I mean, that is, right, the spice of life. We like choice. So even if, you have another snack company that might be competing with you, they're not. It's just, how do you keep as part of the repertoire and be part of the consumer's consideration set that way?
Absolutely. About BIPOC entrepreneurs, is there a special effort to encourage them to be part of Colab, to apply and to be involved?
Look, I would love to see this cohort be diverse in both its representation of entrepreneurs, as well as the size of the businesses that we have and the types of snacks that they offer. So it is holistic. I won't put numbers on anything either way, but I would love this to be, and not just in background, but just in thinking, right, of having that really diverse thought coming to play.
Yeah, and I think SnackFutures, and with Colab, is in a really unique position to bring in those diverse voices who have, and this is just the truth, they have not been a part of these startup hubs, and they haven't been getting the capital and the investment that they need to be as successful as they could be. And I think that's, an issue that we're finally paying attention to in so many ways, that those businesses more than any others are coming up with innovative ideas that, of foods that are culturally appropriate and fun. And, to your point about access, but also affordability, they want to help communities in different ways. So I think, again, SnackFutures has a real opportunity here.
Yes. And I think to that, I think what's been amazing about this journey is that you start realizing that there is opportunity in areas that you normally wouldn't have looked at. And that is one, right? And in all these ways is that we really suspend judgment on why it is, because if there's a true consumer need and there's a market opportunity, well then, shame on everyone for not seeing it first. But, God bless the entrepreneur who got there and has had now the heart and soul to put into that. So please apply.
Great. All right, let's talk about this application process, because I think, some people get really excited about these applications, and some of them, I think they can turn people off. So how do people apply? What are sort of, I know you can't give it all away, but what does it look like? What do they need when they're applying? What should they really be thinking about? You talked about a little bit about, some of that kind of information before, but what should they be thinking about as they apply?
Yeah. So if you go to applycolab.com, or if you go to snackfutures.com, you'll see kind of our bar story, but apply Colab. That will take you to the online application. We've tried to make it pretty straightforward and pretty human terms. So if there's something in there, you're like, I don't know what this is, you can say, I don't know what this is, but I think it's that, and answer it as you may. We've tried not to put, marketing speak and corporate speak in there, but sometimes business is business and we get trapped. So it's an online application. It should be pretty straightforward. I would say put thought into it. We have questions into there. So the earlier conversation is, how do you define well-being? How does your product serve well-being? So we want to see that connection to well-being. So that's kind of nudge one, right? We're looking for well-being snacks. So how do you draw that thread through the consumer need, to how you define or the consumer defines well-being, and how you help address that problem? Again, how we can best help you, how you see that. There's a question I think in there about your story and your journey. So we want to learn from you. The second, I would say, cutoff is we're looking ideally for consumers, or not consumers, entrepreneurs that have businesses that are about $500,000, so $500,000 in revenue and up. And I say and up because we do welcome all sizes. And so we want to be able to help you. We want you where you've got enough there that we can actually help you. And that was deliberate. We want to make sure that our company and our team has something there. Now, we have other ways of talking to other entrepreneurs, which I'll get to the third piece is we are looking for snacks. And in this case, I'm going to be a little harsher on that area. But, I've been talking a lot with our R&D team, and we have an open innovation site. So if you have something, you can go to SnackFutures and apply. So there are other ways to partner with us that we can go on about, and we are very open to that. For Colab specifically, well-being snacks with the 500,000, and then it should be a straightforward online application.
We just had I think is an important one. Can an entrepreneur who is yet to start also apply? And I believe that's a no.
Well, you can apply. So I'm going to say anyone can apply, and and if you're like, this is an idea that I'm really passionate about, you can apply. I will tell you, you'll probably get a quick, polite, not now, because you're not ready yet. But if it's, again, you can go to the SnackFutures site. There's other ways of submitting ideas. So I'm just managing your expectations. You can apply, you just might get rejected from the program faster than even others.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's one part that Colab participants will get, and this sort of mini business course, they also get some funding.
Yes. So again, one of the things that we learned early on with startups is time is money. So responsiveness is really important, which also is that human piece. Is how do you navigate a big company to say, hey, you guys need to answer, we need to respond. mentorship is important, but at the end of the day, they're running a business and cash is king. Like taste is king in snacking and in food, but if you're an entrepreneur, cash is king. And so we are going to give a $20,000 grant. I will say one of the things that we're looking for at the end of this program is hopefully a robust enough relationship with you, and that you feel that as you go to grow, and that's just a starting point. Companies take next rounds of funding, that we would be there for that backing in the future.
That's great. Before I guess my last question for you, Brigette, is, there are a lot of startups out there who might not get picked, right? You're going to pick up to 10. And they really want to be successful. They're focused on well-being. They're thinking about planetary health. They're trying to do all the right things. And you've given a lot of advice already during this show, but I'm wondering what your biggest piece of advice for those startups who can't be part of Colab. What would you tell them?
One, don't give up. Colab, I'm really proud of and I'm really excited for, but at the end of the day, don't let us be the ones to say if that's your worthiness. Let the consumer be the ones to tell you your worthiness, and grow your business as you see people gravitating to what you're selling. Build on that. And we used to joke that innovators in a company have some of the thickest skin because we fail. Innovations fail. I would say entrepreneurs on their own, wow, that's like epic thick skin. It's hard. This is a hard game to get into. So I would say be kind to yourself. That's really important. You're going to be working 24/7 on your baby. And there are days where everything's going to feel great. And there's other days where the whole world is crumbling. And so take care of yourself and know that, you're on a really important journey. So keep going.
What great. We should all do more on yourself. Brigette, always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope folks who are entrepreneurs who are listening can apply. I think this is a great program. So it's applycolab.com. Thank you so much, Brigette. Stay well.
Thank you for having me, Danny. Great to see you again.
Great to see you.
Be well.